Several Latin American countries have closed their borders in the face of the COVID-19 virus. Meanwhile, China has managed to cure almost 84% of all those infected there. Guyana's government and opposition agreed to a full recount of votes following the March 2nd general elections. The postponed municipal elections took place in the Dominican Republic on Sunday after being suspended on February 16th. From the headquarters of TeleSur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. Countries across Latin America further tightened restrictions on Monday to try to stop the spread of the novel coronavirus, with Peru deploying military personnel on the streets, Costa Rica closing its borders, and Paraguay imposing an effective curfew. The region has yet to be hit as hard as Asia or Europe and has moved quickly to contain the highly contagious coronavirus that has shut down cities and transport hubs internationally and sparked a global market sell-off. Chile, which has 155 confirmed COVID-19 cases, is to close its borders to foreigners starting on Wednesday. Costa Rica declared a state of emergency on Monday that included closing its borders and educational centres for a month. Guatemala suspended all flights and banned foreigners from entering the country for 2 weeks, while El Salvador and Honduras were in a state of near lockdown to combat the coronavirus in one of the world's poorest regions. China's National Health Commission reported a total of over 80,000 COVID-19 cases on Monday, of which more than 67,000 patients, representing almost 84%, have recovered and been discharged from hospitals. China has reported just 16 new cases of the novel coronavirus in the past 24 hours. 12 of these were imported from overseas, including 4 cases in Beijing. China, where the COVID-19 virus was first detected in December, now accounts for less than half of the world's 169,000 cases, according to a tally by Johns Hopkins University. China is now adopting stricter measures to contain overseas imports of the virus. Anyone arriving in Beijing from overseas is now quarantined for 14 days in designated facilities, a new policy that took effect on Monday. The COVID-19 virus has spread to at least 141 countries and territories, killing more than 5,700 people worldwide. The Cuban Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that Cuba had authorized the MS Bremer cruise ship to dock in a Cuban port so that its passengers, a small number of whom have been infected by the novel coronavirus, be cleared for repatriation by air. The statement notes that in view of the urgency posed by this situation and the risks to the lives of these individuals, the Cuban government has decided to allow this vessel to dock. In coordination with the British authorities, the Cuban government made arrangements to allow the passengers to return to the UK on chartered flights, following all the security measures established by the WHO and the Cuban Public Health Ministry. The British cruise ship had been seeking to dock in the Caribbean for several days, but several nations refused to host it. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez stressed in a tweet that these times call for solidarity and understanding health as a human right, noting that only through international cooperation can we face the common challenge posed by the COVID-19 outbreak. Meanwhile, a Cuban delegation of specialists led by the Director for Civil Defense at the Ministry of Public Health, José Ernesto Betancourt, has arrived in Venezuela, where a quarantine came into force on Monday as a measure to contain the COVID-19 outbreak.
We come to evaluate the level of readiness and protection and exchange experience. We also come to work together in order to evaluate how to better protect the people, the preparation of institutions, so we are here ready to do the best we can so we can accomplish our mission with Cuba's special delegation and the government of Nicolás Maduro.
And Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza appealed to citizens to strictly observe the measures adopted by the national government to prevent the spread of the novel coronavirus. Posting on Twitter, the Foreign Minister noted that the rigorous steps taken by the Bolivarian government are both timely and appropriate, and urged Venezuelans to act patiently with discipline and caution. U.S. Democratic presidential rivals, former Vice President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, went head-to-head on Sunday night in a debate held without a live audience. The much-anticipated debate came as 4 states head to the polls on Tuesday to choose their candidate. Florida, Illinois, Ohio and Arizona have a total of 577 delegates. Given the rising numbers of people infected with the COVID-19 virus, as well as the death toll in the United States, a large part of the debate focused on the response to the pandemic. Sanders accused President Donald Trump of undermining the good work of government scientists with misinformation.
First thing we have got to do, whether or not I'm president, is to shut this president up right now, because he is undermining the doctors and the scientists who are trying to help the American people. It is unacceptable for him to be blabbering with unfactual information which is confusing the general public.
The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, urged countries to test every suspected case of COVID-19 as the rest of the world registered more cases and deaths than China. The WHO considers testing the backbone of the response to COVID-19. The WHO director recalled that the number of cases outside of China, about 83,000, already exceeds the number of patients diagnosed in China, where the pandemic originated. He stressed that while many nations are improving isolation measures, there is still work to be done in other respects. In this sense, Ghebreyesus recognized that although the population most at risk are the over 60s, young people and even children have also died. French President Emmanuel Macron has postponed the second round of the municipal elections and suspended the controversial pension reform as part of his plan to tackle the spread of the COVID-19 virus. In a 20-minute speech on national television, Macron repeated several times that France is at war with the virus. Starting this Tuesday, Macron announced a nationwide quarantine, imposing restrictions on movement. People should not leave their homes unless strictly necessary, for instance, to shop for food, while keeping a distance of 1 metre from anyone else. Gatherings with others, including family, should be avoided. Macron stressed that this is the only way to protect the most vulnerable groups. From tomorrow at noon, all French borders will be closed, although nationals abroad can return home. All travel will be suspended for 30 days. The French president stressed that sanctions will be imposed on those who do not comply. It is still unknown whether the results of the first round of the municipal elections will be respected or if they will be repeated later on, following low turnout due to the coronavirus scare. According to recent reports, France has around 6,600 cases and has seen 148 deaths. And Italy has reported 349 new deaths from the novel coronavirus, taking its death toll to 2,158, the biggest after China. The number of COVID-19 fatalities has more than doubled since Thursday, when Italy's death toll topped 1,000 for the first time. The country now has 27,980 confirmed cases, compared to just over 15,000 4 days ago. The Ivory Coast has announced the closure of its borders to foreign nationals travelling from countries with more than 100 cases of the novel coronavirus, and also closed schools and universities for 30 days as countries across Africa impose wide-ranging measures to stop the spread of the virus. Although the African continent is still far behind Europe and Asia in terms of the total number of COVID-19 cases, the disease has now reached about half of its countries. Algeria has 48 confirmed cases, Egypt has 110, and South Africa has 62, according to the World Health Organization and national governments. Other African nations have seen fewer cases, mostly in single figures. Benin, Somalia, Liberia and Tanzania announced their first cases on Monday. Most cases were travellers from overseas, but increasing numbers of internal transmission are being reported. African governments and health officials have warned that the disease poses massive challenges to under-resourced health services across the continent. And we have more stories coming up after this break, including on the election dispute in Guyana. Don't go away. Welcome back. Guyana's government and opposition agreed to a full recount of votes in an attempt to end the crisis that has gripped the nation since the March 2nd general elections. The vote recount for the 10 electoral districts of the country started on Monday and is being supervised by a Caribbean community team led by Dominica's former Attorney General and Foreign Minister Francine Baron. The chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission, Claudette Singh, said that she welcomed the initiative and assured that GEOCOM will fully cooperate with the process. However, reports are just in that the process has been stalled once again as representatives of the Ministry of Health arrived at the Commission headquarters to fumigate, with police forcing everyone to leave the building. The Commission announced last Friday that incumbent President David Granger had won a second term, but the opposition People's Progressive Party and international election observers questioned the validity of the results and demanded their verification.
That the CARICOM initiative should operate within the legal framework of the Constitution of Guyana and respect the role of the Elections Commission and the rulings of the Supreme Court. It will not act independently. I urged also that the Commission be allowed to craft the terms of reference governing the relationship between the CARICOM initiative and the Elections Commission. The organizational structure, which should embody supervisory and technical elements, should be determined by the Elections Commission. The Government of Guyana looks forward to a total national recount being completed as soon as possible under the auspices of the Elections Commission.
And meanwhile, the leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, Barak Jagdeo, expressed his concerns around the integrity of the process and called to respect transparency in this national recount of the votes.
Now, the President has said he wants that recount, and I've accepted it. I said we want the recount, and CARICOM has agreed. He made a request to CARICOM to supervise the recount in the presence of all the political parties and all the international observers, box by box. And you have seen in Prime Minister Motley's statement, she urged immediately that all steps be taken to preserve the containers and the boxes so that there is integrity in those boxes, that nobody attempts to enter into the containers or the boxes. And I urge GCOM to do that immediately, given this is the desire of the two political parties. We're going to continue keeping watch at these locations where the boxes, the containers are held. APNU should do the same, and the international observers.
Turning to Bolivia now, a poll released this Monday revealed that the movement towards Socialism Party presidential candidate Luis Arce has taken a strong lead ahead of the May 3rd presidential elections. According to the poll, Arce enjoys 33.3% of voting intention, while former President Carlos Mesa places a distant second with 18.3%. The self-proclaimed de facto President Janine Áñez polls third with 16.9%. The May 3rd presidential election will go to a second round if no candidate secures at least 50% of the vote, or 40% with a 10-point margin over their closest rival. The postponed municipal elections took place in the Dominican Republic on Sunday after the initial vote was suspended on February 16th due to technical glitches with the electronic voting system. More than 7.7 million people were eligible to vote for the mayors of 158 municipalities of the country. Those elected will take office for a term of 4 years on April 24th. The results are still coming in from the polling stations across the country, and the count is expected to take a week. Meanwhile, the Central Electoral Board has received the accompanying committee appointed during the national dialogue process to monitor and follow the electoral process. The Organisation of American States is conducting an investigation into the suspension of the vote on February 16th and is expected to offer its conclusions before the general election scheduled for May 17th. And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more on events in Africa. Don't go away. Welcome back. A 6-year-old child has died after a fire broke out in an overcrowded migrant camp on the Greek island of Lesbos. According to officials, the fire started in a container at the Moria camp, resulting in the tragic death of the young girl. Hundreds of people arrived on the island after Turkey opened its gates to asylum seekers travelling to Europe. There are already more than 37,000 refugees and asylum seekers in Greek migrant camps, originally built to house around 6,000. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for an immediate de-escalation of violence in Iraq, one day after 3 US service members were wounded in a daytime attack on a base for US troops north of Baghdad. On Saturday, 3 American soldiers and several Iraqi troops were wounded in the second major rocket attack on bases housing foreign troops in Iraq. The Iraqi military found 7 rocket launchers and 24 unused rockets in the nearby Abu Isam area. They added that several Iraqi air defense servicemen were critically wounded. The Pentagon reported that 2 of the 3 wounded US troops are seriously injured and are being treated at a military hospital in Baghdad. The rocket attacks came less than 2 days after the US launched retaliatory airstrikes at bases in Iraq that the Pentagon linked to the Kataib Hezbollah militia. Palestine's permanent ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, has accused Israel of stepping up plans for annexation schemes in the West Bank, taking advantage of the international focus on the spread of the novel coronavirus. Mansour sent 3 letters to the UN Secretary-General and the President of the UN General Assembly, outlining the deteriorating situation in the occupied territories, including East Jerusalem. The Palestinian ambassador also warned that the situation was seriously aggravated as Israel escalated plans for annexation and settlement, as well as its aggressions against the Palestinian people. He warned that Israel has taken advantage of the fact that the international community is focused on containing the spread of COVID-19 to accelerate its plan to seize Palestinian land. Russia and Turkey were forced to cut short their first joint patrol along the M4 highway linking Syria's east and west on Sunday due to terrorist actions. The patrol was the result of a recent ceasefire deal between Moscow and Ankara in Syria's Idlib province. The Russian Defense Ministry informed that terrorists were trying to use civilians as a human shield to carry out provocations. The ministry also stressed that Ankara had been given more time to neutralize the rebels who orchestrated the provocation. Turkey and Russia agreed on the details of the ceasefire in the Idlib region after 4 days of talks in the Turkish capital, part of the joint efforts to halt an escalation of violence that has displaced nearly 1 million people. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry delivered messages from President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to Algeria, Tunisia and Mauritania to explain its position on the dispute over Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam. Yasser Othman, aide to the foreign minister, handed over the document to his counterparts in the 3 countries with details on Egypt's viewpoint following the failure of the last round of talks in the United States, which Ethiopia did not attend. The latest meeting in Washington was aimed at signing a deal between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan to overcome the long-running controversy over the dam being built by Ethiopia on the Blue Nile, scheduled for completion in 2 years. Ethiopia described Washington's statements as interference and announced its decision to begin filling the first part of the reservoir after reiterating that it will not cause harm to its neighbours. A gas explosion in the Nigerian city of Lagos has killed 15 people and injured dozens more. The explosion in the Amaru or Dolphin area of Lagos was heard several kilometres away. It destroyed more than 50 buildings, which either collapsed or caught fire in 3 different neighbourhoods, according to the National Emergency Management Agency. The blast was caused by a truck that hit gas bottles stacked up in a gas processing plant, according to an agency spokesman. Rescue workers were seeking to remove rubble from a nearby girls' boarding school, attended by more than 250 pupils. The explosion was also reported to have damaged a gas pipeline. According to Zimbabwe's National Statistics Agency, the country's annual inflation soared to over 500% in February. Zimbabwe suspended the publication of annual consumer prices data last June when inflation hit 176%. The local currency has fallen from parity against the US dollar a year ago to around 18 Zimbabwean dollars to $1 US, although on the black market the rate is over 30 Zimbabwean dollars. In February 2019, Zimbabwe launched currency reforms, including reintroducing the local currency and banning the use of the US dollar in a bid to solve a chronic monetary crisis. Zimbabwe continues to face severe sanctions imposed by the US and the European Union. In November, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Hilal Elva, recognised that economic sanctions are contributing to Zimbabwe's current dire economic and food security situation. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.